Chapter 14. Slappy gazed blankly up at Mrs. Boonshoft. She held him close for a moment, staring back at him. Then she turned to Stella. "Stella, this lying has got to stop," she said softly. "But, Mom," Stella tried to protest. "Talking dummies?" Mrs. Boonshoft cried, swinging Slappy under her arm. "Talking dummies? Do you really expect any intelligent person to believe that?" Stella opened her mouth, but no sound came out of it. "I'm so worried about you, Stella," her mother continued, her voice breaking with emotion. "I've warned you a million times to stop making up stories. You were lying about George's room too, weren't you?" "No," Stella gasped. "No, Mom, really." Mrs. Boonshoft narrowed her eyes at her daughter. "Denying it won't help," she said sternly. "It's one story after another with you." "You've got to believe me," Stella cried, glaring furiously at Slappy. Her mother sighed. "Get cleaned up, Stella. Get dressed. Help your sister put her room back together. Then you and I are going to have a long talk." Before Stella could protest again, Mrs. Boonshoft spun out of the room, carrying Slappy under her arm. She brought him into George's room and tossed him onto the bed. "Where'd you find Slappy?" Georgia asked. She was down on her knees on the floor, trying to clean up the dark stain from the carpet. "Stella claims he walked into her room and talked to her," Mrs. Boonshoft sighed. Georgia dropped her sponge and laughed. "She's sick!" Her mother bit her bottom lip. "It isn't funny, Georgia. It isn't funny at all." The next morning, Georgia brought Slappy down to breakfast. After getting her room back together, she spent hours practicing with him. She thought maybe her mother would like to see some of the comedy act she was working on. Mrs. Boonshoft had an appointment in town and was eager to get out of the house. Georgia plopped down at the breakfast table and placed Slappy on the chair beside her. "I can't believe I missed Allison's party," she moaned. "I'm sorry," her mother replied, pouring herself a mug of coffee. "But we have to have rules around here. We can't have arguing and screaming and wrestling matches. It's just the three of us now since your father died." I know," Georgia stammered. "So we have to stick together. We have to live peacefully with one another. What happened yesterday was a total disgrace." "Yes, I know," Georgia repeated softly. "But it wasn't my fault." Mrs. Boonshoft took a long sip from the white mug, keeping her eyes on Georgia. "I thought of something nice you can do today to get back on my good side," she announced. "Something you can do with that dummy." Georgia's face brightened. "Really? Like what?" "I was talking to Mrs. Kramer last night. You know her daughter Maggie, right?" Georgia nodded, chewing a mouthful of toast. "Yeah, Maggie broke her leg." "Not exactly," her mother replied. "She's in a wheelchair." "Poor thing. It was a really serious hip fracture." Georgia swallowed the toast and reached for the orange juice pitcher. "So what do you want me to do?" Mrs. Boonshoft set down her coffee mug and leaned across the table. "I think it would be nice if you took Slappy over to Maggie's house and put on a little show for her. She's very lonely and depressed. It would really cheer her up." A smile spread over Georgia's face. "That's a great idea, Mom. I'll do it." She turned to Slappy. "We could try our new act, right, Slappy?" "Right," she made Slappy reply in the high Mickey Mouse voice. "It is a great idea," Slappy thought. "Better than they know. Maybe I won't have to kill them after all. Putting on this show would be my good deed, and this time, nothing is going to ruin it." "Good morning." Stella stepped into the kitchen, dressed in white shorts and a bright magenta tank top. She already had her purple cap pulled down over her head. "I'm going too," she announced.